What's up, Scyushi Squad? We are back in more, and we are continuing the 36k power rank series. And today we're going to be focusing on ya boy Lancer. Lance gang, this guy, oh boy. I'm excited for this one, frankly speaking, because it's been a while since I ended up swapping to Lunar Lancer. For those of you that don't know, Lunar Lancer ended up getting a significant rework a couple months back, and ended up actually getting some slight changes with the most, well, not the most recent update, the Shadow Hunter update, which is, of course, still not on consoles yet. So just to mention very briefly, they reduced the knock-up effect of Lunar Form's basic attack. They reduced the knockback on Shadow Lancer class gem minions, and made some minor improvements to those minions as well. So not really that many changes with the Shadow Hunter update, but generally speaking, some of you guys might be watching this video and might just be like, what the heck is this class? But man alive, when they ended up reworking this guy, oh boy, I was maining him for such a long time, dude, just because he's so fun. Lunar Lancer was always a fun character, but he really suffered with not only the functionality of the abilities, but the damage as well. And I'm really hoping that my muscle memory doesn't kick in, because I still know the old Lunar Lancer. You know, I don't have like complete memory with the new Lunar Lancer since its rework. But rest assured, this guy is going to turn some heads. So what we're going to do in today's video is we're not going to be focusing on the build or anything like that. We're most of all just going to do 5 minutes of dungeon farming while I kind of talk about speed farming as a whole, and where this character ends up fitting in that regard. And then we're going to end up doing some delves to show off, okay, does this guy have enough damage to compensate for his lack of survivability? And then we're going to end up fighting a delve boss. So let me start my timer here, and then let's get to it. So first and foremost, you can already notice that our movement speed is at 126. That's with full movement speed gear, keeping in mind that I do not have a C4 spear, right? And then otherwise, obviously, all attack speed. But generally speaking, you gotta consider that that is, why don't I have wings? We got all that movement speed, and we haven't even tagged an enemy with our ally. We haven't even used Pyrodisc or anything like that. So the sheer amount of movement speed that we can get, as you can see, if I pop a flash right here, our movement speed was at 206 or something like that. Why don't I have bombs on my hotbar? I never have anything prepared. So yeah, you can end up being a pretty speedy boy as this class, frankly speaking. Granted, I'm getting some really poor examples, but you can see our base attack is already stupendous. Like, we can handle U10 without a doubt, right? The spear, or the grappling hook is also going to end up having a lot more functionality, because in U10 specifically, or at least I should say geode surface, because U10 is kind of going to end up being irrelevant with this new update adding U11 and so on and so forth. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean that U10 is irrelevant, but U11 is more so, okay, here's going to be builds where we're talking about crystal gear and crystal gems and so on and so forth. But as far as just normal speed farming is concerned, the two main aspects are going to end up being time from traveling from one dungeon to another, and then how fast can you end up defeating the enemies within that dungeon. And as you can see, the Lunar Lancer already can travel between dungeons pretty dang quick, and when we end up actually getting into the dungeon, he just annihilates everything. Like, he's so freaking strong, dude, it doesn't even matter. So really good speed farmer, definitely top tier. I might say it's I don't know, it's on par with the Neon Ninja in terms of its fun factor, that's for sure. Neon Ninja's still going to end up being faster, but I'd say Lunar Lancer is probably a close second. Yeah, he might be the second fastest speed farmer in the game, just because of his natural movement speed, which does mean consistent movement speed. And why I say it's funner than Neon Ninja is because you don't have to backpedal to see the benefit of the speed, you know? And on top of all of that, one of the really cool things about its about the Lunar Lancer's right click and the grapple is that it's so much more functional now that you can use it from really far out. And since geode surface has such really tall dungeons and structures that you gotta get into, well, it ends up being pretty dang worthwhile to end up actually using the ability. Now, there are other abilities on the Lancer. Frankly speaking, I'm really glad that you don't have to use them, because unfortunately they're not very good. Like, the #1 ability does a lot of damage, but it kind of just, I don't know, it launches you up into the air, and then when you're in the air, it essentially changes your grappling hook to end up having a different functionality, which is really nice, but generally speaking is not it's not going to end up being as functional as you would want it to be. Now, that said, at the very least, for traveling between dungeons, it can be really, really detrimental because you'll end up getting a boost towards your jump and you get slow fall, and then you can end up just grappling, use your number 1 to get an additional grappling hook and so on and so forth. But the whole point of how this character's kitted is you basically are supposed to jump up into the air and then grapple down onto the enemies to end up dealing a significant amount of damage to those enemies. I'm sorry I didn't do that 5-star. It's a wee bit annoying to try and do that one right now, so it's just kind of like, whatever. But you can use this very effectively to start triggering a lot of movement speed stuff. You know, it's just really good for clearing large groups of enemies. But as far as just outputs of raw damage, you don't really need to use those abilities just because, you know, it's going to end up taking a lot longer to cast these abilities than it is to actually just hold left click and damage everything. But if you're far enough away, you can see that we almost did maximum damage right there. That was like 74 mil if I'm not mistaken. So really, really significant damage. It's just that not all situations end up calling for it, right? Anyways, this will probably end up being the last dungeon because I don't think we got to do the full 5 minutes, frankly speaking. I think you guys probably already saw everything you need to see. So this is going to end up being the ally from our class gem ability. He's kind of an idiot, but it's definitely better than it used to be because he'll teleport to you. Yeah, he does teleport to you now. And he does do a decent amount of damage if he would ever attack this guy. There we go. See, he's kind of an idiot. He does a lot of damage, and the cool thing is that you can actually have multiple of this guy at once if you get lucky enough to have them all spawn. And how he looks right now and how cool he was is because of our ultimate ability, which I didn't bother using because I wanted to save it for the next section, which is us going into the delves. But yeah, there is no question whether or not you could end up using Lunar Lancer for speed farming. In fact, I'd recommend doing it just because it's so much fun. Like, I love using the grappling hook now that they've just made it a lot better. That said, there are definitely still issues. Sometimes the grappling hook does end up getting caught on things and generally speaking doesn't always work, but hey, whatever. Now, granted, this is going to end up only being 119 depth. I know that I should be doing a deeper depth to kind of show you guys an example of how this character can end up handling itself, but generally speaking, you can see that our damage is still fine. We're still doing a pretty significant amount of damage, and so you can end up definitely using Lunar Lancer for going through delves, because what delves kind of does differently than speed farming is the only other real aspect of the game, I would say, is there's speed farming, there's delves, and then maybe a boss killer. But generally speaking, what you do in delves is you need to either output enough damage that everything's dead and can't hurt you because these enemies can end up slapping you so hard, or you have to compensate for your lack of damage by having high survivability. So, you know, something like Tomb Razor or Draco, which do have a significant amount of damage, but generally speaking, they also have insane survivability. So usually, even if their damage isn't good enough to defeat certain enemies very quickly, you'll at the very least be able to just survive long enough that the enemy dies, which the Lunar Lancer doesn't really have that survivability complex. However, it does have a lot of damage, as you can see. And there's our minions. We're starting to get like 2 or 3 of them spawning at a time, which again, I just love how stupid that looks. It's just great. Of course, the other aspect that comes into play with delves is if you don't have enough damage, you could be a speedy character simply to get to the objective, and Lunar Lancer can do either or. I'd say it's probably more important for Lancer to just speed through everything, but you don't always have to do it. Anyways, hopefully this ends up going well, but essentially we would end up using, again, our jump into the air, slam down on him and stuff, but we're going to end up popping our ult, which is going to end up just doing heaps and heaps of damage, as you can see. When we end up using all of our abilities, it's essentially going to end up draining more and more energy, which, as you can see, is completely broken. I keep spamming my ult, but my ult again, which is supposed to throw down a spear, but it just doesn't seem to be working. I'm also trying to pop flash, and that's not working either. Unfortunately, that's the one thing. Like, I really enjoy the ult of the Lunar Lancer, but I would say that it's really, really unstable. It's not very good, just because of so many different mechanics trying to go off at once, and that weird somersault front flip that you saw me do when I was in my ultimate, generally speaking, is this one right here. You're kind of static and stuck in place, which is really, really annoying. That's the ultimate that I was trying to do to give me additional damage on top of everything. But as you can see, it's not like Lunar Lancer suffers in the damage department necessarily, but it isn't going to necessarily be a boss killer either. Now, generally speaking, can you end up maining the character? Again, yes, of course you can. It's going to end up being a lot of fun. Speed farming is where the class shines. It can handle delves okay. And then other than that, as far as bosses are concerned, you would probably end up just using a physical set that you have on your Lancer and just throwing it all onto your Shadow Hunter instead. Obviously, you gotta get a different weapon, but generally speaking, it could end up being perfectly fine. Yeah, anyways, hopefully you ended up finding that video helpful. Blah, blah, blah. Smash like, sub for more, buy the merch you want to support the channel. Highly recommend the Lunar Lancer because it's one of my favorites, outside of the fact that I just love the Shadow Hunter so much more.